The gunshot echoed across the dusty plains of Silverwater Creek, Montana Territory, 1875, as Penelope Graves ducked behind an overturned wagon, her heart hammering against her ribs. 3 weeks ago, she had been a respectable schoolteacher in Boston. Now she was a woman on the run, hiding from bandits who'd attacked the stagecoach carrying her to a new teaching position in Helena. "You can't hide forever, lady," a gruff voice called out. Penelope clutched her small leather satchel to her chest. Inside was everything she owned: a few personal items, letters from her late parents, and the deed to a small plot of land her uncle had left her. She hadn't even had time to properly mourn him before his creditors had forced her to flee Boston. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her press herself tighter against the wagon. More bandits. She closed her eyes, saying a silent prayer. The hoofbeats grew louder, then stopped. Gunshots rang out, but they weren't aimed at her. A deep voice called out, "Drop your weapons or the next one won't be a warning." More gunfire erupted, and Penelope covered her ears. Then silence fell. "Madam, you can come out now, they're gone." Slowly, Penelope peered around the edge of the wagon. A tall man sat atop a chestnut horse, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. He holstered his revolver with practiced ease. "Are you hurt?" he asked, dismounting in one fluid motion. "No, I don't believe so." Penelope stood on shaky legs, brushing dust from her travel-worn dress. "Thank you, sir. You saved my life." "Knox Miller," he said, tipping his hat. His face was sun-weathered but handsome, with sharp blue eyes that assessed her carefully. "And you'd be Penelope Graves." She extended her gloved hand, attempting dignity despite her disheveled appearance. "I was on my way to Helena. I've accepted a teaching position there." Knox glanced at the destroyed stagecoach, the dead driver, and the 2 passengers who had fled into the wilderness at the first sign of trouble. "Doesn't look like you'll be getting to Helena today, Miss Graves." He glanced at the sinking sun. "My ranch is about an hour's ride from here. You can stay there tonight, send word to Helena in the morning." Penelope hesitated. Accepting the hospitality of a strange man went against everything she'd been raised to believe proper. But the alternative, staying alone in the wilderness or attempting to walk to the nearest settlement, seemed far more dangerous. "I would be most grateful, Mr. Miller," she finally said. Knox nodded and helped her gather her scattered belongings. He lifted her onto his horse with strong, gentle hands, then mounted behind her. Penelope stiffened at the improper proximity, but relaxed slightly when he kept a respectful distance, reaching around her only to hold the reins. "What brings a Boston lady to Montana Territory?" he asked as they rode across the open grassland. "How did you know I'm from Boston?" She felt his chest rumble with a quiet laugh behind her. "Your accent, and those shoes weren't made for Western soil." Penelope glanced down at her once fine boots, now scuffed and dirty. "My uncle left me a small inheritance, a plot of land near Helena. I thought I might start fresh here, away from." She trailed off, unwilling to share the humiliation of her family's fall from grace after her father's failed investments and subsequent death. "Away from the past," Knox finished for her. "The West is good for that." They rode in companionable silence until a sprawling ranch came into view. It wasn't the largest property she'd seen, but it was well maintained, with a sturdy main house, a large barn, and several outbuildings. Cattle dotted the surrounding pastures. "Welcome to Silverwater Ranch," Knox said, dismounting and helping her down. "It's not much, but it's home." "It's lovely," Penelope said sincerely, impressed by the evident care with which the property was maintained. The front door opened, and an older woman with silver-streaked hair hurried out. "Knox Miller, I was about to send the boys out looking for you." "Who's this?" "Mrs. Bennett, this is Miss Graves. Her stagecoach was attacked by the Delaney gang. She needs a place to stay tonight." The woman's stern expression softened immediately. "You poor dear, come in, come in. I'll draw you a bath and find you something to wear. Those clothes look like they've seen better days." "Mrs. Bennett is my housekeeper," Knox explained as they walked toward the house. "She came with the ranch when I bought it 5 years ago and reminds me of that fact daily." "Someone has to keep you civilized," Mrs. Bennett retorted, but there was affection in her voice. Inside, the ranch house was surprisingly refined. Simple but quality furniture filled the rooms, and landscape paintings adorned the walls. It was a far cry from the rustic cabin Penelope had expected. After a much-needed bath and dressed in a borrowed nightgown and robe, Penelope joined Knox and Mrs. Bennet for a late supper. The food was simple but delicious: roast beef, potatoes, and fresh baked bread. "I've sent one of the hands to notify the sheriff about the attack," Knox said. "He'll likely ride out in the morning to ask you questions." "Thank you," Penelope said, "and thank you for your hospitality. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." "The West can be dangerous, especially for someone traveling alone," Knox said. "What does your husband think of your journey?" "I'm not married, Mr. Miller," Penelope said. "My parents passed away last year and I have no other family." Mrs. Bennet clicked her tongue sympathetically. "Well, you're safe now, dear, and Knox here knows something about being alone in the world, don't you?" Knox shot his housekeeper a warning look, which she ignored with the confidence of long service. "Mrs. Bennet believes everyone should know everyone else's business," he said dryly. "She'll have my life story out of me for your entertainment if I don't stop her." "And what's wrong with Miss Graves knowing you were once a Pony Express rider? Or that you built this ranch from nothing after the war? False modesty doesn't suit you, Knox Miller." Penelope found herself smiling at their easy banter. "I'd like to hear about the Pony Express if you don't mind sharing." Knox's expression softened slightly. "Another time, perhaps. You've had a long day, Miss Graves, and tomorrow will bring its own challenges." After supper, Mrs. Bennet showed Penelope to a small but comfortable guest room. Through the window, she could see Knox walking toward the barn, his tall figure silhouetted against the moonlit sky. Despite her exhaustion, sleep was slow to come as she pondered the strange turn her life had taken. The next morning, Sheriff Thomas Whitaker arrived just as Penelope was finishing breakfast. He was a burly man with a bushy mustache and kind eyes that belied his intimidating size. "Miss Graves," he said, removing his hat as Knox introduced them. "Terrible business with the stagecoach. I've got men tracking the Delaney gang, but they're slippery as eels. Can you tell me what happened?" Penelope recounted the attack as best she could, though most of it remained a blur of terror and confusion. "And you say you were headed to Helena?" the sheriff asked, jotting notes in a small book. "Yes, I've accepted a teaching position at the new school there." The sheriff exchanged a look with Knox. "I hate to be the bearer of bad news, madam, but I passed through Helena last week. The school building caught fire. They're rebuilding, but it'll be months before they need a teacher." Penelope felt the blood drain from her face. "But my position, I'm afraid your letter probably crossed paths with theirs. The school board would have sent word about the delay." "I see." Penelope struggled to maintain her composure. Without the teaching position, she had nowhere to go and very little money to sustain her. The small plot of land her uncle had left her was undeveloped, no house, no means of income. After the sheriff left, Penelope sat on the porch trying to formulate a new plan. Knox found her there, staring out at the distant mountains. "Mrs. Bennet said you might need this." He offered her a cup of coffee, which she accepted gratefully. "Thank you for everything." Knox leaned against the porch railing. "Sheriff Whitaker tells me you've got land near Cotter's Creek. You know it. It's about 20 miles east of here. Good land, but isolated. Your uncle, Jacob Graves, he homesteaded there for a spell before moving on, kept ownership of the land, though." Penelope nodded. "He wrote to me occasionally. I never met him, but he knew I was struggling after my parents died. The land was his gift to me." She gave a hollow laugh. "Though what I'm to do with it now, I have no idea." Knox was quiet for a moment, then said, "I need a teacher." "I beg your pardon," for the ranch children. "There are 5 families working for me with 12 children between them. Nearest school is in town, too far for daily travel. I've been meaning to hire someone to teach them here." "You want me to teach here, at Silverwater Ranch?" Knox nodded. "Room and board provided, plus wages. It won't be what Helena offered, but it would tide you over until the school rebuilds. Give you time to decide what to do with your land." Penelope studied him, searching for any sign of improper motivation, but found only straightforward practicality in his gaze. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Knox shifted uncomfortably. I know what it's like to be without options, Miss Graves. Besides, my ranch hands have been pestering me about schooling for their children. You'd be solving a problem for me as much as I'd be solving one for you." It was a generous offer, more than she could have hoped for in her current predicament. Still, caution made her hesitate. "I would need proper accommodations, and assurance of my reputation's safety. There's a small cabin near the main house, the former foreman's quarters. It's simple but private. As for your reputation, Mrs. Bennet would be a proper chaperone, and no one at Silverwater would disrespect you." Penelope considered her options, which were admittedly few. "I would be grateful to accept your offer, Mr. Miller, at least until the Helena School is rebuilt." Knox nodded, seeming pleased but trying not to show it. "Good. We can ride out to your land tomorrow, let you see what you've inherited. Then you can start teaching next week, once we've set up the bunkhouse as a schoolroom." The next day, Knox and Penelope rode east toward her uncle's land. The journey gave Penelope a chance to appreciate the beauty of Montana territory, rolling grasslands giving way to pine forests, with mountains rising majestically in the distance. Knox proved to be knowledgeable about the area, pointing out landmarks and sharing the history of the region. "Your land sits at the base of those foothills," Knox said as they crested a rise around midday. "Good water source, sheltered from the worst winter winds." When they finally reached the property, Penelope was struck by its wild beauty. A clear stream ran through a meadow flanked by pine trees, with the mountains providing a stunning backdrop. The remains of a small cabin stood near the tree line, just a stone foundation and chimney now, reclaimed by nature after years of abandonment. "It's beautiful," she breathed, dismounting to walk through the tall grass. "I never imagined." "Your uncle chose well," Knox agreed. "Land like this, with good water and timber, is valuable. You could rebuild here someday." Penelope tried to envision it a small house, perhaps a garden, livestock grazing in the meadow. It seemed like an impossible dream for a city-bred woman alone. "I wouldn't know the first thing about ranching or farming," she admitted. "You could learn or sell it." "Plenty of people looking for good land." "No," she said quickly. "I couldn't sell it. It's all I have left of my family." Knox nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Then we'll figure something else out." They ate a simple lunch by the stream, and Penelope found herself relaxing in Knox's company. Despite his rugged exterior, he was well-spoken and surprisingly knowledgeable about literature and history. "You're not what I expected from a cowboy, Mr. Miller," she said as they packed up to leave. "And what did you expect, Miss Graves? Someone less educated, I suppose." Knox smiled, a rare expression that transformed his stern face. "My mother was a teacher before she married my father. She made sure her sons appreciated learning even after we moved west. You have brothers," a shadow passed over his face. "Had two, both died in the war." "I'm sorry," Penelope said softly. "Which side?" "Different sides," Knox said curtly. "That's the tragedy of it." They rode back to Silverwater Ranch in contemplative silence. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the land, Penelope realized she felt more at peace than she had in years. There was something healing about this wild country, something that put her own troubles in perspective. The next week passed in a blur of activity as Penelope settled into life at Silverwater Ranch. The small cabin Knox had promised proved to be charming once cleaned and furnished. Mrs. Bennet took Penelope under her wing, introducing her to the ranch families and helping her set up the makeshift schoolroom in a corner of the bunkhouse. Her first day of teaching was both challenging and rewarding. The children ranged in age from 6 to 15 and had varying levels of education. Some could barely read, while others showed surprising aptitude for mathematics and science. What they all shared was enthusiasm. School was a novel experience, a break from chores and an opportunity to learn things beyond ranch life. Knox kept his distance during that first week, busy with ranch operations. Penelope would see him riding out with his men at dawn and returning at dusk, sometimes joining her and Mrs. Bennet for supper, other times eating with his ranch hands in the bunkhouse. When their paths did cross, he was unfailingly polite but reserved. It was Mrs. Bennet who filled in the gaps in Penelope's understanding of Silverwaiter's owner. "He came here after the war with nothing but his horse and the clothes on his back," she told Penelope one evening as they shelled peas on the porch. "Worked as a ranch hand, saved every penny. When old Mr. Silverwaiter decided to retire and move back east, Knox bought this place with everything he had and borrowed the rest. He seems to have done well for himself," Penelope observed, watching as Knox instructed a young ranch hand in the proper way to rope a calf. "He works harder than any man I've ever known," Mrs. Bennet said. "This ranch is everything to him, sometimes I think too much so." She gave Penelope a meaningful look. "Man needs more in his life than just work, Mrs. Bennet," Penelope admonished, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "I hope you're not implying—" "I'm not implying anything, dear, just making an observation." The older woman smiled innocently and changed the subject. As weeks passed, Penelope found herself developing a routine. Mornings and early afternoons were devoted to teaching, late afternoons to planning lessons and helping Mrs. Bennet with household tasks. In the evenings, she often sat on her cabin's small porch, reading or simply enjoying the peaceful twilight. It was during one such evening that Knox approached her cabin, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Miss Graves," he said, removing his hat, "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all, Mr. Miller. Would you like to sit?" She gestured to the other chair on the porch. Knox sat, turning his hat in his hands. "I wanted to see how you're settling in. The children seem to be enjoying their lessons. They're wonderful students, eager to learn, respectful. You should be proud of them." "I'm proud of what you're doing with them," Knox said. "Some of those kids never held a book before you came. Now they're reading stories, doing sums." Penelope smiled, warmed by the compliment. "Thank you. It's rewarding work." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "I received a letter from Helena today," Knox finally said. "The school reconstruction is progressing faster than expected. They'll be ready for teachers by fall term." "Oh," Penelope felt a strange disappointment. "That's good news, I suppose, is it?" Knox looked at her directly. "Do you still want to go?" The question caught her off guard. Did she want to leave Silverwaiter? 3 months ago, teaching in Helena had seemed like her only salvation. Now, "I don't know," she admitted. "I've grown fond of the ranch, the children." Knox nodded, looking back out at the night sky. "I've been thinking about your land at Cotter's Creek." "What about it? It's good grazing land, could support a small herd. Silverwaiter's growing. I need more pasture." Penelope tensed. "Are you offering to buy my land, Mr. Miller?" "No," Knox said quickly. "I'm suggesting a partnership of sorts. I could graze some of my cattle on your land, help you build a proper cabin there. In return, you'd get a percentage of the cattle profits. It would give you income independence." "Why would you do that?" Knox met her gaze steadily. "Because I don't want you to leave, Miss Graves, but I don't want to hold you here if you have dreams elsewhere." The sincerity in his voice made Penelope's heart beat faster. "That's very generous of you, not generosity, good business." But there was something in his eyes that suggested more than business. Before Penelope could respond, a commotion from the direction of the main house interrupted them. A ranch hand was riding hard toward them, shouting Knox's name. Knox stood immediately. "Stay here," he told Penelope, already striding toward the approaching rider. Penelope watched as the two men conversed urgently. Knox's posture stiffened, and he barked orders that sent the ranch hand galloping back toward the bunkhouse. "What's happening?" Penelope called, walking toward Knox despite his instruction to stay put. "Cattle rustlers," Knox said grimly. "They hit the north pasture, took about 20 head and wounded 2 of my men who tried to stop them. Dear God, are they badly hurt?" Joe took a bullet in the shoulder. "Young Billy got pistol whipped. Doc's with them now." Knox's face was hard with anger. "It's the Delaney gang again, same ones that attacked your stagecoach. What will you do?" "Track them, get my cattle back." Knox was already walking toward the barn. "I've sent for the sheriff, but we can't wait. The trail gets cold fast." "Be careful," Penelope said, surprising herself with the depth of concern in her voice. Knox paused, looking back at her. For a moment his stern expression softened. "I'll be back by sundown tomorrow, don't worry." But Penelope did worry. All through that night and the next day she found herself distracted during lessons, her gaze constantly drifting to the window, searching the horizon for riders returning. The children noticed her preoccupation. "Miss Graves, are you worried about Mr. Miller?" asked Emma, the 10-year-old daughter of Knox's foreman. "I'm concerned for all the men," Penelope replied diplomatically. Emma nodded wisely. "Pa says Mr. Miller is the best tracker in the territory, and he's real good with a gun. He'll be okay." "I'm sure you're right," Penelope said, though the knot of anxiety in her stomach didn't ease. It was well past sundown when the men finally returned. Penelope was sitting with Mrs. Bennet on the main house porch when they rode in fewer men than had left, moving slowly, several horses without riders. Penelope's heart lurched when she didn't immediately see Knox among them. She stood, straining to see in the gathering darkness. "Mrs. Bennet," she began, fear making her voice tight. "There he is," Mrs. Bennet said, pointing to a rider near the back of the group, supporting someone on his horse. Relief flooded through Penelope, followed immediately by concern as she realized Knox was indeed holding another man in front of him, someone who appeared to be badly injured. The next hour was chaos as the wounded were carried into the bunkhouse where the doctor was still tending to the men injured in the initial raid. Mrs. Bennet organized the ranch wives to prepare food and bandages, while Penelope helped where she could, boiling water and tearing strips of clean linen. It was near midnight when Knox finally appeared at the main house, his face drawn with exhaustion, a bloody bandage visible on his forearm. "You're hurt," Penelope said, rushing to his side. "It's nothing, bullet grazed me." He sank into a chair at the kitchen table, accepting the coffee Mrs. Bennet pressed into his hands. "We got the cattle back, most of them anyway. And the rustlers?" Mrs. Bennet asked. "3 dead. 2 escaped. Sheriff's got 4 in custody, including Tom Delaney himself." Knox's voice was flat with fatigue. "We lost Sam Tucker." Mrs. Bennet crossed herself. "His poor wife, those little boys." "I've already told her," said Silverwaiter will take care of them. Knox stared into his coffee. "I should have been faster, smarter." "Don't you start that," Mrs. Bennet said firmly. "Sam knew the risks, same as any man who rides for a brand in this territory." Knox didn't respond, just drained his coffee and stood. "I need to check on the wounded." "You need to let me look at that arm first," Penelope said, surprising herself with her authoritative tone. Knox looked like he might argue, but then nodded wearily. "Fine." Mrs. Bennet discreetly made herself scarce as Penelope gathered clean bandages and a basin of water. She worked in silence, carefully removing the makeshift bandage to reveal a nasty gash along Knox's forearm. "This needs stitches," she said. "Doc's busy with men hurt worse than me." "I can do it," Penelope said. At Knox's raised eyebrow, she added, "My father was a doctor. I assisted him often." Without waiting for his response, she threaded a needle and prepared to suture the wound. Knox didn't flinch as the needle pierced his skin, though she knew it must be painful. "You've done this before," he observed as she worked, "many times." "My father believed women should be educated in practical matters as well as academic ones." She tied off the last stitch and began wrapping clean bandages around his arm. "He would have supported my coming west, I think. My mother would have been horrified. And what do you think?" "Now that you've seen what the West is really like," Penelope secured the bandage and met his gaze. "I think there's beauty in the harshness, strength in the struggle. I understand now why people choose this life despite the dangers." Knox studied her face. "You've changed since you arrived." "Have I? You're stronger, more confident." He smiled slightly. "Though you were never lacking in spirit, I knew that the moment I found you ready to fight off rustlers with nothing but a daringness and determination." Penelope laughed, recalling her pathetic attempts at self-defense. "I was terrified, but you didn't run. That counts for something out here." Their eyes met, and Penelope felt a jolt of awareness pass between them. For a moment, she thought Knox might reach for her. Instead, he stood, breaking the moment. "Thank you for the doctoring, Miss Graves." "I should check on my men." After he left, Penelope remained at the table, her hands still warm from tending his wound, her heart beating a peculiar rhythm. The aftermath of the rustling incident brought changes to Silverwater Ranch. Security was tightened, with men patrolling the boundaries day and night. Knox was often absent, riding to neighboring ranches to coordinate efforts against the remaining Delaney gang members or meeting with the sheriff in town. Penelope threw herself into teaching, adding evening classes for the adults who expressed interest in improving their reading and writing skills. She also found herself taking on more responsibilities around the ranch, helping Mrs. Bennett manage household affairs and even learning basic horse riding from Emma's father, the foreman. One evening, nearly a month after the rustling incident, Knox appeared at her cabin door, looking more relaxed than she'd seen him in weeks. "Miss Graves, I was wondering if you might accompany me on a ride tomorrow. There's something I'd like to show you." "Of course," Penelope agreed, curious. "Is everything all right? Everything's fine. It's your day off from teaching, isn't it?" Penelope nodded, pleased that he'd noticed her schedule. "Good, we'll leave after breakfast if that suits you." The next morning dawned clear and crisp, a perfect early autumn day. Knox was waiting for her at the stables, 2 horses saddled and ready. He helped her mount the gentle mare he'd selected for her, his hands strong and sure at her waist. They rode east, and Penelope soon realized they were heading toward her land at Cotter's Creek. The journey was pleasant, with Knox more talkative than usual, pointing out wildlife and sharing stories about the early days of his ranching efforts. "I nearly lost everything that first winter," he admitted. "Blizzard took half my herd. If Mrs. Bennett's husband hadn't loaned me money to see me through to spring, Silverwater would have failed before it truly began." "Is that why she still lives at the ranch, out of gratitude?" Knox nodded. "After Mr. Bennett died, I offered her a home for life. She's family now in everything but blood." As they approached Cotter's Creek, Penelope noticed something different: smoke rising from where her uncle's cabin ruins stood. "Knox, what?" "Just wait," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. When they crested the final rise, Penelope gasped. Where there had been only a stone foundation, a cabin now stood small but sturdy, with a porch across the front and a stone chimney. Several men were working on what appeared to be a barn nearby. "What is this?" she asked, turning to Knox in confusion. "I told you I wanted a partnership," he said. "This is the first step. The cabin's nearly finished. The barn will be done within the week. Come spring, we can bring a small herd up here." Penelope dismounted and walked toward the cabin in a daze. "You built this for me?" "For us," Knox corrected, following her. "For our partnership." Inside, the cabin was simple but well crafted. A main room with a fireplace, a small bedroom, and a lean-to kitchen. Someone had even installed glass windows, a luxury in the territory. "It's beautiful," Penelope said, emotion making her voice thick, "but I don't understand. Why go to all this trouble for a business arrangement?" Knox removed his hat, turning it in his hands in that now familiar gesture of uncertainty. "Because it's not just business, Penelope. It never was." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice made her breath catch. "What are you saying, Knox?" "I'm saying I built this cabin because I want you to have a home here, because I hope," he broke off, then tried again. "I hope you'll consider staying in Montana, at Silverwater, with me." Penelope's heart raced. "As your teacher, as my wife." The word hung in the air between them. Penelope stared at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt or ulterior motive. She found only sincerity and something else: vulnerability she'd never seen in him before. "This is very sudden," she managed to say. "Is it? I've known since the night of the rustling, when I rode back and saw you waiting on the porch. I knew then that I wanted to come home to you every day for the rest of my life." "Knox, I'm not asking for an answer now," he said quickly. "I know it's not a simple decision. You have options: Helena or selling this land and going back east. I just wanted you to know that there's another choice." He gestured around the cabin. "A life here with me." "What kind of life would it be?" Penelope asked softly. "A partnership," Knox said, "in every sense. This cabin would be our retreat, a place to escape the demands of the ranch occasionally. You could continue teaching the children need you, and I need a partner, Penelope, someone to share the burdens and joys of this life. And if I said yes, what would your vows be to me? She asked, needing to hear the words to know his intentions were honorable and deep. Knox stepped closer, taking her hands in his. I would vow to respect you, to value your mind and spirit as much as your heart, to build a life worthy of you. His voice dropped lower. And I would say simply, stay and I'll make it worthwhile. The honesty in those words, the promise of a life built together as equals, moved Penelope deeply. In Boston, marriage had always seemed a trap, a loss of the independence she valued. But here, with this man, it felt like an opening, an expansion of possibilities. I don't need an answer today, Knox said again. Take all the time you need, but Penelope found she didn't need more time. In the month since arriving at Silverwater, she had come to admire Knox's integrity, his quiet strength, his devotion to the people who depended on him. And somewhere along the way, admiration had blossomed into something deeper. Yes, she said simply. Knox blinked. Yes, I'll stay. Yes, I'll marry you. Penelope smiled at his stunned expression. I've learned that life is unpredictable, Knox. The path I thought I'd follow led me here instead, and now I can't imagine being anywhere else. The joy that transformed Knox's face made him look younger, the weight of responsibility momentarily lifted. He cupped her face in his calloused hands and kissed her tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as she responded. When they finally separated, both breathless, Knox rested his forehead against hers. You've made me the happiest man in the territory. Show me the rest of our land, Penelope said, linking her fingers with his. Tell me what you envision for it. They spent the afternoon exploring, with Knox pointing out where they could plant an orchard, where a garden would get the best sun, how they might divert the stream to create a small pond. Penelope added her own ideas: a fenced yard for future children to play in, a separate schoolroom where she could tutor students during summer months. As the sun began to set, they sat on the porch of their new cabin, watching the golden light transform the landscape. When would you like to marry? Knox asked, his arm around her shoulders. Soon, Penelope said. Before winter sets in, I don't want to wait. Neither do I. 2 weeks. That would give us time to arrange a proper ceremony in town, invite the neighboring ranchers. 2 weeks, Penelope agreed, leaning into his embrace. Though I don't need anything elaborate. You deserve a proper wedding, Knox insisted. And Mrs. Bennet would never forgive me if we eloped. Penelope laughed, imagining the housekeeper's outrage. You're right, 2 weeks it is. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Silverwater Ranch. Mrs. Bennet was overjoyed, immediately taking charge of wedding preparations with an enthusiasm that suggested she'd been waiting for this announcement. The ranch hands offered hearty congratulations to Knox, while their wives surrounded Penelope with advice and offers of help with her trousseau. The children were perhaps the most excited of all, especially when Penelope assured them that she would continue as their teacher after the wedding. Will you live in the big house with Mr. Miller? Asked 7-year-old Thomas. Sometimes, Penelope explained, and sometimes we'll stay at our cabin at Cotter's Creek, but I'll always be here for school days. The 2 weeks before the wedding passed in a whirlwind of activity. Knox rode to Helena to purchase a proper ring and arrange for a minister, while Penelope and Mrs. Bennet transformed her simple blue dress into a suitable wedding gown with the addition of lace trim and pearl buttons salvaged from Mrs. Bennet's own wedding dress. News arrived that the Helena school had hired another teacher, which removed Penelope's last lingering obligation. She wrote a polite letter explaining her change in circumstances, feeling only relief that her path was now clear. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, a perfect October day with just enough crispness in the air to hint at the coming winter. The ceremony was held in the Silverwater Ranch yard, which had been decorated with autumn wildflowers and ribbons. Nearly every rancher within 20 miles attended, along with the sheriff and the doctor and various townspeople who had come to know Knox through business dealings. Penelope stood before the minister, Knox's hand warm and steady in hers, and made her vows with a clear, confident voice. When Knox spoke his vows, his deep voice carried across the gathered crowd, but his eyes never left hers, as if they were alone in the world. I, Knox Miller, take you, Penelope Graves, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to respect you, protect you, and cherish you all the days of my life. I vow to be a true partner to you, to share in your joys and sorrows, to build a life worthy of your trust. His voice softened. And I promise that if you stay with me, I will make every day worthwhile. I now pronounce you man and wife, the minister declared. You may kiss your bride. Knox's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, drawing cheers from the assembled guests. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night, with music and dancing and enough food to feed twice the number present. As the evening wore on, Knox found Penelope sitting on the porch, taking a moment's respite from the festivities. "Are you happy, Mrs. Miller?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Incredibly so," she said, loving the sound of her new name. "And you, husband, more than I ever thought possible." Knox took her hand, running his thumb over the simple gold band he'd placed there hours before. "I have a wedding gift for you." He handed her a leather-bound book. Opening it, Penelope discovered it was a deed to all of Silverwater Ranch, now in both their names. "Knox, this isn't necessary. It is to me," he said firmly. "What's mine is yours now. Equal partners, remember?" Touched beyond words, Penelope leaned in to kiss him, no longer concerned about propriety now that they were properly wed. Later that night, after the guests had departed and they were finally alone in the main house, Knox carried her over the threshold of what would now be their shared bedroom. With gentle hands and reverent words, he showed her the depth of his love, making their first night together a beautiful discovery of mutual passion and tenderness. As they lay together in the quiet aftermath, Penelope rested her head on Knox's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "What are you thinking?" he asked, stroking her hair. "That I never expected to find this life when I boarded that stagecoach in Boston." She propped herself up to look at him. "Do you believe in fate, Knox?" "I believe that life takes unexpected turns," he said thoughtfully. "And that sometimes, what looks like disaster is actually the beginning of something wonderful. Like a stagecoach robbery, exactly like a stagecoach robbery," he smiled, pulling her closer, "though I'd prefer not to repeat that particular experience." "Agreed," Penelope laughed, settling back against him. "What happens now? Now we build our life together," Knox said simply. Day by day, winter came early that year, blanketing Silverwater Ranch in snow by mid-November. The newlyweds settled into a comfortable routine, Penelope teaching during the day while Knox managed ranch operations. Evenings spent together planning for the future, nights spent in each other's arms. Once a week, weather permitting, they rode to their cabin at Cotter's Creek, where Knox was teaching Penelope the basics of ranching. She proved to be a quick study, surprising both of them with her aptitude for what had once seemed such foreign work. "You're a natural," Knox said one day as he watched her successfully herd a small group of cattle into a pen. "Who would have thought a Boston schoolteacher would take to ranching so well?" "I had a good teacher," Penelope replied with a smile, "and it helps that I love the land." As winter deepened, life at Silverwater centered around the main house. The schoolroom moved from the bunkhouse to a corner of the large kitchen where the children could stay warm during lessons. In the evenings, ranch families would often gather for communal meals and entertainment music, storytelling, and the reading lessons that many of the adults were now pursuing under Penelope's guidance. Christmas brought a special joy, with the entire ranch coming together to celebrate. Knox surprised Penelope with a piano, a tremendous extravagance that had been secretly transported from Helena and installed in the main house parlor. "How did you know?" Penelope asked, running her fingers reverently over the keys. "Mrs. Bennet mentioned you played." "I thought it would bring a bit of civilization to our wilderness." Knox looked uncertain. "Do you like it?" Penelope's answer was to sit down and play, her fingers finding the familiar patterns despite years without practice. The music filled the house, bringing everyone running to listen in wonder. The joy on Knox's face as he watched her play was a gift greater than the instrument itself. As winter gave way to spring, Penelope discovered she was expecting their first child. Knox's reaction to the news was everything she could have hoped for: joy, tenderness, and a protective streak that would have been annoying if it weren't so endearing. "I'm with child, not made of glass," she reminded him when he tried to prevent her from continuing her teaching duties. "I know," Knox said, kissing her forehead, "but you can't blame a man for wanting to protect what he loves most in this world." The ranch flourished that year, with the spring calving bringing a record number of healthy animals. The cattle Knox had placed on the Cotter's Creek land thrived in the lush pastures, and by summer, construction began on a larger cabin there, with plans to eventually expand it into a second ranch house as their family grew. Penelope's belly grew round as summer turned to fall, and on a crisp October evening exactly 1 year after their wedding, she gave birth to a daughter they named Elizabeth Bennet Miller, in honor of the woman who had helped bring them together. "She's perfect," Knox whispered, cradling his tiny daughter with hands that seemed suddenly too large and rough for such a delicate task. The wonder on his face as he looked at their child made Penelope fall in love with him all over again. "She is," Penelope agreed, exhausted but happier than she'd ever been. "Our first little rancher, or teacher," Knox said, "or both. She can be anything she wants to be." As Elizabeth grew from infant to toddler, Silverwater Ranch continued to prosper. Knox's innovative ranching methods and Penelope's skilled management of the household accounts brought increasing prosperity, allowing them to improve the ranch and help their workers build better lives. Penelope never did take that teaching position in Helena, though she maintained the school at Silverwater, eventually training one of her older students to assist her. The cabin at Cotter's Creek became their special retreat, a place where they could escape the demands of the ranch and simply be a family. 3 years after Elizabeth's birth, Penelope gave birth to twins: a boy they named Jacob after her uncle, and a girl they called Margaret after Knox's mother. Their family felt complete, though Knox would sometimes tease about having enough children to form their own cattle drive someday. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Knox took Penelope back to the spot where they had first met, the site of the stagecoach attack that had brought her into his life. Someone had erected a small marker there, commemorating those who had died in similar attacks before the Delaney gang was finally brought to justice. "It seems like a lifetime ago," Penelope said, looking at the peaceful landscape that had once been the scene of such terror. "In many ways it was," Knox replied, his arm around her waist. "I was a different man before I met you." "How so?" "Lonelier, more closed off." He looked down at her, the love in his eyes as strong as ever. "You brought light into my life, Penelope. You and our children, you're everything to me. Even when I argue with you about cattle breeding or insist that the ranch hand's children need more books," she teased. "Especially then," Knox laughed. "Our partnership works because we balance each other. Your Boston education and my Western practicality together were stronger than either of us alone." As they rode back to Silverwater, Penelope reflected on the twists of fate that had brought her to this life. The financial ruin that had forced her to leave Boston, the stagecoach attack that had stranded her, the school fire that had closed one door so another could open all, had seemed like disasters at the time. Now she recognized them as steps on the path that led to where she was meant to be. That evening, as they sat on the porch of their home watching their children play in the yard, Knox took her hand in his. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Staying here, marrying a rough cowboy instead of returning to civilization?" Penelope smiled, remembering the simple, powerful words he had spoken in that half-built cabin 5 years earlier, words that had promised a lifetime of love and partnership. "Never," she said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "You promised to make staying worthwhile, and you have, Knox." Every single day. As the sun set over Silverwater Ranch, casting golden light across the land they had built together, Penelope knew with absolute certainty that no Boston drawing room could ever have given her the rich, meaningful life she had found in the wild Montana territory, with the cowboy who had kept his wedding vows in ways more profound than either of them could have imagined.